Touch your wrist. Feel that steady pulse under your skin. Your brain takes that simple signal and tells you a fundamental truth. You are alive. Now imagine that signal just stops. Not your heart rate. Your pulse is fine. Your heart is pumping blood. Your lungs are taking in air. But deep inside your head, the circuit that proves your existence suddenly turns off. You look at your hand, you feel your pulse, and you think, that is a lie. In Paris, in 1880, a woman walked into a doctor's office. We only know her as Mademoiselle X. She was not screaming, she was not hysterical. She spoke in a calm, flat voice. She told the doctor she had no brain, no nerves, no chest, no stomach. She believed her internal organs had completely vanished. The doctor offered her food. She refused. Why feed a body that does not exist? She believed she was a corpse, a physical shell carrying around a ghost. And because her mind convinced her she was dead, she sat in that room and quietly starved to death. This was the first documented case of Cotard Syndrome, or as neurologists call it, walking corpse syndrome. It is one of the rarest, most disturbing glitches in human psychology because it exposes a terrifying vulnerability in how we experience reality. If a healthy person can look at their own pulse and firmly believe they died days ago, how do you know your brain isn't tricking you right now? To understand how a mind turns off its own existence, we have to look at a broken circuit hidden inside the brain. To understand what goes wrong in Cotard's, think about how you process a face. When you look at your mother or your spouse, two things happen instantly. Your visual system identifies them. That is the logical part. At the exact same second, an emotional circuit fires deep in your brain. That is the feeling part. When both systems work together, you feel warmth and connection. In a condition called Capgras delusion, that emotional circuit snaps. The logic remains intact. So when a Capgras patient looks at their mother, their brain reaches a bizarre conclusion. This looks like my mother, but I feel nothing, so she must be an imposter. Cotard Syndrome is that exact same breakdown turned inward. Instead of projecting the disconnect onto someone else, the brain directs it at you. You look in the mirror, you see your face, you touch your arm, you feel your pulse. But the internal signal that says this body belongs to me is completely dead. So your conscious mind tries to solve a terrifying puzzle. If your body is moving, but you feel zero internal existence, what are you? Your mind lands on the only conclusion that fits the sensory data. I died. In 1996, a man known in medical files as Patient E survived a brutal motorcycle accident in Scotland. His physical recovery was quick, but his brain circuit was shattered. Shortly after leaving the hospital, his mother moved him to South Africa. The heat was intense. The environment was completely unfamiliar. Patient E looked around at the burning sun and formed a terrifying belief. He believed he had died in that motorcycle crash in Scotland, and because he felt no internal presence and the air around him was hot, he was convinced his mother had taken him straight to hell. For some patients, the mind takes it even further. When the brain loses connection with internal organs, it misinterprets everyday body signals. A minor stomach cramp is processed as internal organs rotting away. A neutral scent in the room gets registered as the smell of their own decaying skin. They aren't trying to make up a story. Their brain is simply building a logical narrative to explain why it feels like a corpse. And that leads directly into a terrifying mental prison. Because if your brain believes you are already dead, it creates a paradox that doctors struggle to break. It sounds simple. You point to their breath. You show them their pulse. You ask them to speak. For a normal mind, that is undeniable proof. For a Cotard patient, logic works in reverse. In 2008, Graham suffered a severe bout of depression. One morning, he woke up and made a quiet declaration. He believed his brain was dead, completely gone. He stopped taking his medication. He refused to eat proper meals. When doctors tried to reason with him, Graham just shook his head. Why take pills for a brain that does not exist? Why feed a body that has already died? He spent his days wandering to the local graveyard. He felt a strange comfort among the gravestones. He believed that was the only place he truly belonged. Here is where the psychology gets terrifying. If you take a pin and prick a Cotard patient's finger, a drop of red blood appears. A sane person sees the blood and realizes, I am alive. A Cotard patient looks at the blood, smiles calmly, and says, I guess dead bodies bleed after all. Their mind does not fix its belief to fit reality. It twists reality to preserve the belief. And that creates a mental cage, the immortality paradox. If your brain believes you are already a corpse, you lose the fear of death, but you also lose the possibility of escape. Graham wanted his suffering to end, but he believed suicide was completely impossible. As he told his doctors, you cannot kill what is already dead. He was trapped in an endless loop, living in a body he believed could never die again. For decades, doctors thought Cotard's was purely a psychological story the mind made up, a defense mechanism for severe trauma, until they put Graham inside a brain scanner and saw something that shocked the medical world. For a long time, doctors wondered if Cotard's was just a mental trick, a defense mechanism created by a fractured mind. Then, neurologists decided to look inside. In 2013, a team of brain specialists in Belgium and France put Graham into a PET scanner. They wanted to map the energy consumption in his brain. They wanted to see where the metabolic electricity was flowing and where it was dark. What showed up on the monitor shocked the medical world. In a healthy, conscious human brain, certain key regions are always active, specifically the frontal and parietal networks. This is the brain's default mode network. It is the neural circuit responsible for self-awareness. It creates the subtle, continuous background feeling of I exist. In Graham's scan, those regions were nearly pitch black. Metabolic activity in those critical areas was reduced to a fraction of normal levels. It matched the brain scan of someone under deep general anesthesia or someone in a vegetative state. Think about what that means. Graham was awake. He was walking around. He was speaking in complete sentences. But mechanically, the internal engine responsible for generating self-awareness was completely asleep. He wasn't lying. He wasn't being dramatic. His brain was literally running on standby mode. The hardware that creates the feeling of being alive had powered down. This discovery changed everything. Cotard's isn't just a bizarre story someone tells themselves. It is a biological glitch, a severe neurological crash where the body stays awake while the circuit for self turns off, which leaves one final question. If your brain's existence circuit can power down like a light switch, can it ever be turned back on? How do you force a dead brain back to life? For doctors treating Graham, the answer wasn't simple logic. You cannot argue someone out of a neurological glitch. You have to manually reboot the hardware. Doctors placed Graham on a targeted regimen, high-dose antidepressants, combined with electroconvulsive therapy. ECT sounds drastic, but in simple terms, it delivers controlled electrical pulses to the brain. It is the medical equivalent of hitting the reset button on a frozen computer. Slowly, the electrical currents forced the default mode network to wake up. Over months of treatment, the dark regions on Graham's scans began to glow again. Blood flow returned to his frontal and parietal lobes. One morning, Graham woke up and realized something subtle had changed. He felt the temperature of the room. He felt his chest rise and fall. He didn't just see his pulse, he felt it. For the first time in years, Graham looked at his doctors and said a sentence he thought he would never speak again. "I am alive." Graham eventually recovered. He returned to his life, left the graveyards behind, and regained his sense of self. But his case left the medical world with an eerie realization. We like to think our identity is permanent. We think our sense of self is a solid, unshakable truth. Cotard Syndrome proves it isn't. Your whole reality, your name, your feelings, your very existence depends on a tiny electrical signal firing correctly inside your skull. If that single circuit glitches, your mind will look at your living body, touch your beating heart, and quietly decide you no longer exist. And the scariest part? You wouldn't even know your brain was lying.